If you've ever been underestimated, counted out, or made to feel small by someone who was supposed to be in your corner, then you know the fire I'm talking about. That burning desire to prove them wrong. Hit that like button, subscribe for stories that deliver the justice we all crave, and get comfortable, because you're about to watch one of the most satisfying revenge stories you will ever hear. My doctor entered the sterile white room, clipboard in hand, and addressed my family with that measured, professional tone that usually precedes bad news. "He's regained consciousness," he announced, and in that moment, my eyes fluttered open to find my entire family gathered around my hospital bed, their faces a mixture of relief and concern. What they didn't know was that I wasn't just waking up from the accident, I was awakening to a new reality. One where I would finally get the revenge I'd been meticulously planning for years. Let me take you back to where it all began. I was 23, working a dead-end retail job, living paycheck to paycheck in a cramped apartment that smelled perpetually of instant noodles and desperation. My older brother, Michael, was the golden child of our family, a successful lawyer with a corner office, a luxury car, and a wife who looked like she stepped out of a magazine. Every family gathering, without fail, he would find a way to belittle my existence. Like, "Still working at that clothing store, little brother?" He'd ask, voice dripping with condescension while swirling the expensive wine in his glass. "I could get you a job as a janitor at my firm if you're interested. At least there's room for advancement there." The family would laugh, and I would force a smile while my hands clenched into fists under the table. My parents never defended me. They had bought into Michael's narrative that I was lazy, unmotivated, and destined to remain a disappointment. The truth was, I had dropped out of college when our dad got sick, taking on extra shifts to help with medical bills. But that sacrifice had been forgotten. Rewritten as failure in Michael's version of our family history, the breaking point came at Christmas dinner 2 years ago. I had just been promoted to assistant manager at the store, a small victory that meant longer hours but slightly better pay. When I announced it, Michael had nearly choked on his prime rib. "Assistant manager? At 30 years old?" He'd roared with laughter. "I was making partner at my firm by that age. Seriously, when are you going to do something meaningful with your life? You're an embarrassment to this family." My mother had patted my arm. "Michael's right, dear. Maybe you should consider going back to school. We're all getting worried about you." That night, lying in bed listening to the pipes rattle in my cheap apartment building, something inside me shifted. The humiliation had burned away the last of my complacency. I wasn't going to be their punching bag anymore. I wasn't going to be the family failure. I started small, taking online business courses during my lunch breaks and late at night after my shifts. I discovered a passion for digital marketing, something that came naturally to me. Within 6 months, I had launched a small social media management business, working with local businesses to improve their online presence. I reinvested every dollar back into the business. Working 16-hour days between my retail job and my growing client list, Michael found out about my little side project through our mother and made sure to mock me for it at every opportunity. "Still playing on Facebook for pennies?" He'd sneer. "While you're wasting your time, I just closed another 7-figure case." What he didn't know was that my little side project was generating more income than his legal practice. What he didn't know was that I had landed a contract with a national retail chain, a contract that would change everything. The retail chain happened to be the same company I worked for. When they approached me about managing their national social media campaigns, I saw my opportunity. The contract was substantial enough that I could finally quit my retail job and focus on my business full-time. But more importantly, it gave me inside access to the company's operations. Their financial structures and their vulnerabilities. I spent a year learning everything I could about the company, identifying inefficiencies and opportunities for growth. I developed a comprehensive business plan for a digital transformation that would revolutionize their operations and significantly increase their profitability. And then I discovered something that made my blood boil. The company was planning to close hundreds of stores, including the one where I worked, leaving thousands of employees jobless. That's when I formulated my revenge. I wasn't just going to leave the company, I was going to take it over. I spent months quietly acquiring shares, using the profits from my business to buy stock whenever the price dipped, I networked with other shareholders, listening to their frustrations with the current leadership. I built alliances with board members who were unhappy with the CEO's performance. Meanwhile, Michael continued his campaign of belittlement. At our sister's wedding, he cornered me by the bar. "Heard you're still living in that tiny apartment," he said, clapping me on the back hard enough to make me spill my drink. "When are you going to grow up and get a real job? Maybe I could talk to my connections about getting you into a decent company." I smiled, thinking about the shares I'd just acquired that gave me controlling interest in the very company he was suggesting I apply to. "Thanks, Michael, but I've got my own connections now." The day of the annual shareholders meeting arrived. I walked into the corporate headquarters wearing a suit that cost more than my monthly rent. Carrying a portfolio that contained my business plan and proof of my controlling shares, Michael had no idea I was even there. He was probably in his corner office, billing clients by the hour and looking down on the world. When my name was called to speak, murmurs rippled through the room. Most of the board members knew me only as the social media consultant they'd hired. They had no idea about the shares I'd accumulated. "I'm here today to propose a change in leadership," I began, my voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "The current CEO has led this company into a pattern of stagnation and poor decision-making. His plan to close hundreds of stores will devastate communities and employees while ultimately weakening the company's market position." I laid out my business plan, detailing how digital transformation could revitalize the company, save jobs, and increase profitability. I presented data, projections, and concrete strategies. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment before erupting into applause. The vote was unanimous. I was the new CEO. My first act as CEO was to cancel the store closures. My second was to schedule a meeting with the legal department, which coincidentally was the same firm where Michael worked. When I walked into the conference room, Michael was already there, along with several other partners from his firm. He did a double take when he saw me, his eyes widening in disbelief. "What are you doing here?" he asked, recovering quickly and adopting his usual patronizing tone. "Lost your way to the mailroom?" I smiled and took a seat at the head of the table. "Actually, Michael, I'm here in my capacity as CEO. I believe you're representing the company in our upcoming merger negotiations." The color drained from Michael's face as the realization dawned. The other partners shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances. "That's right," I continued, enjoying every moment of his discomfort. "And I'll be reviewing all our legal contracts and partnerships. I've already noticed some concerning patterns in billing that suggest we might be overpaying for certain services." Michael's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. For the first time in his life, he seemed speechless. Over the next few months, I systematically dismantled Michael's sense of superiority. I renegotiated the company's contract with his firm, cutting their fees by 40%. I implemented policies that prioritized transparency and accountability, directly targeting the kind of shady practices Michael had built his career on. The satisfaction I felt was immense. But it was nothing compared to what came next. At our family's Thanksgiving dinner, Michael arrived late, looking disheveled and stressed. He had lost several major clients since I'd taken over as CEO, and word had spread through the legal community about his firm's diminished relationship with our company. "Nice suit," he muttered when he saw me, unable to meet my eyes. "Must have cost a pretty penny. It's not as much as the company car I just ordered," I replied casually. "Or the penthouse apartment I'm moving into next month." My parents looked at me with newfound respect while Michael's wife shot daggers at me with her eyes. The family dynamics had shifted completely. The final piece of my revenge fell into place at Christmas dinner, exactly 1 year after Michael had humiliated me in front of the entire family. I smiled and took a seat at the head of the table. "Actually, Michael, I'm here in my capacity as CEO. I believe you're representing the company in our upcoming merger negotiations." The color drained from Michael's face as the realization dawned. The other partners shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances. "That's right," I continued, enjoying every moment of his discomfort. "And I'll be reviewing all our legal contracts and partnerships. I've already noticed some concerning patterns in billing that suggest we might be overpaying for certain services." Michael's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. first time in his life, he seemed speechless. Over the next few months, I systematically dismantled Michael's sense of superiority. I renegotiated the company's contract with his firm, cutting their fees by 40%. I implemented policies that prioritized transparency and accountability, directly targeting the kind of shady practices Michael had built his career on. The satisfaction I felt was immense, but it was nothing compared to what came next. At our family's Thanksgiving dinner, Michael arrived late, looking disheveled and stressed. He had lost several major clients since I'd taken over as CEO, and word had spread through the legal community about his firm's diminished relationship with our company. "It's a nice suit," he muttered when he saw me, unable to meet my eyes. "It must have cost a pretty penny." "Not as much as the company car I just ordered," I replied casually, "or the penthouse apartment I'm moving into next month." My parents looked at me with newfound respect, while Michael's wife shot daggers at me with her eyes. The family dynamics had shifted completely. The final piece of my revenge fell into place at Christmas dinner, exactly 1 year after Michael had humiliated me in front of the entire family. Arrived with a bottle of wine that cost more than his monthly car payment, wearing a watch that had once been his dream purchase. "I have an announcement," I said after dessert, standing up and tapping my glass for attention. "I've decided to establish a scholarship fund in our parents' name to help students who have to leave college to care for sick family members. The initial endowment is $5 million. Tears filled my mother's eyes as my father shook my hand, genuinely proud for the first time in years. Michael sat frozen, his face a mask of disbelief and envy. "I also wanted to thank Michael," I continued, turning to face my brother directly. "Without his constant encouragement and belief in me, I never would have found the motivation to succeed. So thank you, brother." The irony was lost on no one except Michael himself, who managed a weak smile and mumbled something about being proud of me. As I drove home that night, the city lights blurring past my window, I felt a profound sense of satisfaction. Revenge wasn't just about proving Michael wrong, it was about reclaiming my own narrative, transforming from the family failure into someone who could make a difference. The car accident happened a week later. A drunk driver ran a red light, sending my car spinning into a utility pole. When I woke up in the hospital, surrounded by my family, the first thing I saw was Michael's face, etched with genuine concern. "You're going to be okay," he said, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. "The doctors said you're lucky to be alive." As my family crowded around me, expressing relief and love, I realized something important. Revenge had given me the satisfaction I craved, but it was the forgiveness I felt in that moment that truly set me free. "Thank you for being here," I said to Michael, reaching out to squeeze his hand. "Family is what really matters." The journey from that hospital bed to where I am today, running a successful company, maintaining healthy family relationships, and finding peace within myself has taught me that the sweetest revenge isn't about destroying others, but about building yourself up so high that their negativity can no longer reach you. If you've ever been underestimated, belittled, or made to feel small, remember this: your story isn't finished being written. The people who doubt you today might be begging for your help tomorrow. Success is the best revenge, but forgiveness is the ultimate liberation. This story isn't just about getting even. It's about recognizing your own worth when others refuse to see it. It's about turning their negativity into fuel for your fire. Most importantly, it's about understanding that true power comes not from crushing your enemies, but from rising so high that you can offer them a hand up when they fall. The next time someone tries to make you feel small, remember that you have the power to write your own ending. Sometimes, the most satisfying revenge is living well enough that you no longer need it at all. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and share in the comments about a time you turned criticism into motivation. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of transformation and triumph. After all, everyone loves a good comeback story, especially when it's their own. The months that followed were a whirlwind of change. Not just for me, but for everyone whose orbit had touched mine. The scholarship fund became a reality, its announcement making local news. I received hundreds of letters from young people who had been forced to put their dreams on hold, their stories echoing my own past sacrifice. Reading them, I felt a sense of purpose I'd never experienced in the boardroom. This was legacy. This was something Michael could never diminish or take credit for. My relationship with my parents underwent its own transformation. They began calling me not just to check in, but for advice. My father, a man who had always measured success in tangible terms like job titles and salaries, started talking about pride and character. You know, he said to me one afternoon as we sat on the patio of my new penthouse, looking out over the city skyline, "I always worried about you. Not because I thought you were lazy, but because I didn't understand what you were building. Michael's success was always so loud. Yours was quiet. I'll see now that you were building something stronger." My mother's change was even more profound. She started inviting me over for dinner, just the two of us. And for the first time, she listened. Really listened. She apologized, her voice thick with regret, for not seeing my struggle, for not defending me against Michael's barbs. "He was always so sure of himself," she confessed, "and you were always so reserved. I mistook his confidence for competence, and your quietness for weakness. I'm so sorry, my son." In her forgiveness, I found a piece of myself I thought had been lost forever, but the most significant change was in Michael. The legal firm, reeling from the loss of our account and the ripple effect it had on their reputation, began to fracture. Partners left, clients departed. And the golden boy found his corner office feeling a lot less cornered and a lot more exposed. He stopped coming to family gatherings for a while, his shame apparently too heavy to carry into rooms where he was no longer the undisputed champion. Then, one rainy Tuesday, he showed up at my office. My assistant, a sharp young woman named Sarah, who had once been a cashier at one of the stores I'd saved from closure, showed him in. He stood before my massive oak desk, a man diminished. His expensive suit seemed to hang on him, his shoulders slumped. The arrogant gleam in his eyes was gone, replaced by a weary vulnerability I'd never seen before. "I need your help," he said, the words clearly costing him whatever pride he had left. He explained that the firm was dissolving, was losing his partnership, his office, his entire identity, was facing financial ruin, the very thing he had mocked me for living with for years. He had nowhere else to turn. I could have reveled in it. I could have laughed in his face, quoted back to him every condescending remark he had ever made. I could have fired him on the spot. And for a fleeting moment, the temptation was immense. But looking at the broken man in front of me, I didn't see my tormentor. I saw my brother. I saw a man who had built his house on a foundation of sand, and now the tide was coming in. "What do you need me to do?" I asked. He stared at me, stunned. I don't understand. "After everything, I'm not doing this for you, Michael," I said, leaning forward. "I'm doing it for me. I'm doing it for the little boy who looked up to his big brother. I'm doing it for our parents who don't deserve to see both their sons fail. And I'm doing it because holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I'm done with that. I didn't give him his old life back, didn't write him a check, or offer him a corner office. Instead, I offered him a chance to earn his own redemption. I had an opening in the company's legal department for a junior counsel. It was a massive step down for him, a position that paid less than a quarter of what he used to make. It meant answering to people he once would have considered beneath him. To my surprise, he took it. Watching Michael navigate his new reality was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. He was quiet at first, humbled, learning the systems from the ground up. The other employees, many of whom knew the history between us, watched him with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. But he worked. He put in the hours, did the grunt work, and slowly, painstakingly, began to rebuild not just his career, but his character. The turning point came during a critical negotiation for a new partnership. The deal was complex, and our team was hitting a wall. Late one night, as we were all staring at a seemingly insurmountable problem, Michael spoke up. He saw a loophole, a creative legal strategy that none of the rest of us had considered. It was brilliant. It was the old Michael, the sharp legal mind, but without the arrogance. We used his strategy and closed the deal. In the celebration that followed, the CEO of the other company sought him out. Shaking his hand and complimenting his insight, I watched as a small, genuine smile touched Michael's lips. It wasn't the smug grin of a man who had one. It was the quiet satisfaction of a man who had contributed. That night, he came to my office. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For not giving me what I deserved," he replied. "For giving me what I needed." We never spoke of the past again. The unspoken apology hung in the air between us, accepted and forgiven. We weren't best friends, but we were brothers again. We found a new equilibrium, built not on a hierarchy of success and failure, but on mutual respect. The revenge I had so meticulously planned had evolved into something else entirely. It wasn't about proving him wrong anymore. It was about seeing the potential for change in both of us. I had set out to destroy his world, but in the end, I had helped him build a new one. And in doing so, I had completed my own transformation. If you're out there right now, nursing a wound from someone who underestimated you, who belittled your dreams or made you feel small, I want you to know that your path forward doesn't have to be paved with their ruin. True power isn't the ability to crush those who hurt you. It's the strength to rise so high that you can choose forgiveness instead. It's the wisdom to understand that the most satisfying victories aren't the ones where your enemies fall, but the ones where you can extend a hand to help them back up. My story isn't unique. The world is full of people who were counted out, only to redefine success on their own terms. The common thread isn't revenge, it's resilience. It's the quiet determination to keep going when everyone expects you to quit. It's the courage to believe in yourself when no one else will, so the next time someone laughs at your ambitions, or doubts your abilities, or tries to put you in a box, remember this: they are telling you more about their own limitations than they are about yours. Their smallness is not your destiny. Your destiny is what you choose to build, day by day, brick by brick, with or without their approval. The journey from the hospital bed to this moment has taught me that life's greatest ironies often become its most profound lessons. The brother who tried to break me became the catalyst for my greatest strength. The humiliation that once felt like a weight around my neck became the fuel for my ascent. And the revenge I once craved so desperately became a gift of compassion I never knew I had to give. As I look out over the city from my office, watching the lights come on as dusk settles, I think about all the people out there who are where I was feeling stuck, feeling small, feeling like the world has written them off. I want you to know that your story is still being written. The best chapters may be yet to come. Don't let the doubters, the naysayers, or the Michaels in your life dictate your narrative. You are the author of your own story. And sometimes, the most powerful plot twist isn't the one where you get even. It's the one where you find peace. If this story touched you, if you see a piece of your own journey in mine, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Hit that like button, leave a comment about your own comeback story, and subscribe for more tales of transformation. Because in a world that often celebrates the loud and the arrogant, it's the quiet strength of the resilient that truly changes the world. And remember, the sweetest revenge isn't living well, it's living well enough to help others do the same. That's not just success. That's legacy. The peace I found wasn't a destination, but a new way of traveling. Life didn't suddenly become a series of effortless wins. There were still challenges, boardroom battles, and moments of gut-wrenching doubt. The difference was, I no longer carried the heavy baggage of needing to prove my worth to a ghost. The ghost of my past self, and the ghost of my brother's scorn, had finally been laid to rest. This newfound freedom, however, created a space I wasn't sure how to fill. For so long, my drive had been fueled by the fire of revenge. Now, I had to find a new fuel. That new fuel arrived in the form of a young woman named Maya. She was the first recipient of our family, Escosio, a brilliant computer science student who had left MIT to care for her mother during a battle with cancer. She came to thank me in person, her eyes holding a fierce intelligence and a weariness that went far beyond her years. We talked for over 2 hours, not about business or success, but about purpose. About the strange and often painful detours life forces us to take. You know, she said, her voice quiet but firm, I spent a year being angry. Angry at my mom for getting sick, angry at the world for not stopping, angry at myself for not being able to be in 2 places at once. But then I realized something. The time I spent with her, taking her to appointments, just sitting with her in the quiet, I learned more about life and love in that year than I ever learned in a lecture hall. It wasn't a detour. It was the real path. Her words struck me with the force of a revelation. All this time, I had viewed my years of struggle, the retail job, the cramped apartment, Michael's constant derision as a shameful prologue to my success story. Maya helped me see it differently. It wasn't a prologue. It was the foundation. It was where I learned empathy, where I understood the dignity of hard work, where I forged the resilience that would later serve me in the corporate world. I hadn't escaped my past. I had integrated it. This shift in perspective changed how I led my company. I initiated a program to identify and mentor promising employees from our retail floors, offering them pathways into corporate roles they never thought possible. I started spending less time in my penthouse office and more time on the ground. In the stores, listening to the people who were the true heart of the business. I wasn't just a CEO anymore. I was a student of my own organization, learning from the very people I had once been counted among. One afternoon, while visiting a store in a small, struggling town, I saw him. Michael was there, not in a suit, but in a company polo shirt, helping an elderly woman load her groceries into her car. He was smiling, a real unforced smile. He saw me watching, and for a second the old flicker of defensiveness returned to his eyes. But then it softened. He finished helping the woman and walked over to me. "Remember when you worked in a place like this?" he asked, looking around the store. "Every day," I replied. "I never respected it," he said, his voice low. "I never respected you. I see now how hard it is. I see the strength it takes to do this day in and day out. I'm sorry, little brother." For everything, his apology was different from the one in my office. It wasn't born of desperation. It was born of understanding. It was the final piece of the puzzle clicking into place. The circle was complete. There was no more debt, no more score to settle. They were just two brothers standing in a parking lot, finally seeing each other clearly. Our relationship found a new, casual rhythm. We'd grab lunch sometimes, or meet for a coffee. We talked about sports, about our parents, about the small absurdities of life. We never spoke of the past, but it was no longer a minefield we had to tiptoe around. It was simply the ground beneath our feet, the shared history that had brought us to this more peaceful place. The ultimate test of this new chapter came in an unexpected form. I received a call from Sarah, my former assistant, who was now thriving as a department head. She sounded panicked. The company was facing a hostile takeover bid from a rival corporation, a group of investors known for their brutal cost-cutting and disregard for employees. They saw our company not as a community of people, but as a collection of assets to be stripped and sold. The board was in a panic. The old guard, the ones who had supported my takeover, were urging me to sell, to cash out, and let them carve up the company for parts. They argued that fighting would be futile, that we would lose everything. For a moment, the old fear returned. The fear of being the little guy again, of having the rug pulled out from under me, of being proven a failure after all. I called an emergency all-hands meeting. I stood in front of thousands of employees, some in the room, some via video link, their faces etched with anxiety. I saw the same fear in their eyes that I had felt for so many years. And in that moment, I knew what I had to do. "They think we're just a balance sheet," I began, my voice echoing through the auditorium. "They think our value is in our inventory, our real estate, our stock price. They're wrong. Our value is in you. It's in the single mother who works the night shift to put food on the table. It's in the kid saving up for college, the manager who knows every customer by name, the dreamer who started in the stockroom and is now running a department. They want to buy this company." I say this company was never for sale. I laid out a radical plan. We would fight back not with lawyers and bankers, but with ourselves. We would launch a campaign telling our story, showcasing the people who made the company what it was. We would mobilize our customers, turning them into advocates. We would offer an employee stock ownership plan, allowing the very people who built the company to share in its ownership and defense. It was a massive gamble. It meant risking my entire fortune, my reputation, everything I had built. But as I looked out at the sea of faces, I felt a calm certainty. This was what it was all for. This was the real legacy. The fight was grueling. The rival corporation launched a smear campaign, painting me as a reckless sentimentalist. The media was brutal, but something incredible happened. Our people rallied. Store managers organized community events. Cashiers made heartfelt videos that went viral. Customers started sharing their own stories about our employees, about the kindness and service they had received. A movement began, sparked not by a marketing budget, but by genuine human connection. Michael played a crucial role. Using his legal expertise, he found a clause in the corporate charter that the rivals had overlooked, a technicality that gave us a powerful legal foothold. He worked tirelessly, not for glory, but for the family he now felt a part of. On the day of the final shareholder vote, the atmosphere was electric. The rival corporation's CEO, a man known for his icy demeanor and ruthless efficiency, stood to make his final pitch. He spoke of numbers, of synergies, of maximizing shareholder value. It was cold, clinical, and utterly soulless. Then it was my turn. I walked to the podium, not with a briefcase full of charts, but with a photo album. I didn't talk about profit margins. I've told stories. I told them about Maria, the janitor who had worked for the company for 30 years and sent 3 kids to college. I told them about the store in Texas that had become a de facto community center after a hurricane. I told them about Maya, the scholarship student who was now developing technology that would revolutionize our industry. This company is more than wood and steel and stock certificates, I said, my voice thick with emotion. It's a living, breathing thing. It's a promise that if you work hard and care about people, you can build something that matters. They offer you a quick profit. I'm offering you the chance to be part of something that will outlast us all. The choice is yours. The vote wasn't even close. We won. The celebration that night was the most joyous I had ever experienced. It wasn't a victory for me. It was a victory for us. As I stood on a stage in the warehouse, looking out at the cheering crowd, I saw Michael near the front, his face beaming with a pride that was no longer about himself, but about something far greater in the end. The revenge I had so desperately craved was a small, petty thing compared to the fulfillment I found in building something that lifted others up. The man who wanted to be the boss became the man who wanted to serve. The brother who wanted to defeat his sibling became the brother who wanted to fight. Alongside him, if you're on your own journey, facing your own battles, remember this. The greatest success you can ever achieve is not in towering over your enemies, but in building a table big enough for everyone to sit at. The most powerful story you can tell is not one of vengeance, but one of redemption, both for yourself and for those who never thought you'd make it. This is my story. It's a story of revenge, yes, but it's also a story of forgiveness. It's a story of failure, but it's also a story of faith. It's a story about a boy who was told he would never amount to anything, and the man he became because he refused to believe it. Your story is still being written. The pen is in your hand. Don't let anyone else tell you how it ends. If this journey has meant something to you, share it. Let someone else know that their past does not define their future. Hit that subscribe button, because there are millions of stories like this out there waiting to be told. And until next time, keep building, keep believing, and keep writing your own comeback. The world is waiting. The victory against the takeover was a watershed moment. But life, in its infinite wisdom, doesn't allow you to rest on your laurels for long. The glow of our shared triumph eventually faded into the steady hum of daily operations, and with that hum came a new, quieter challenge. What do you do after you've won? The adrenaline of the fight was gone, and in its place, a profound sense of responsibility settled over me. I wasn't just a CEO anymore. I was a steward of thousands of people's livelihoods and dreams. The weight of that was heavier and far more meaningful than any title. My personal life began to reflect this shift. The penthouse, once a symbol of my ascent, started to feel sterile, empty. I found myself spending more and more time at my parents' house. It's not out of obligation, but out of a genuine desire for connection. my father and I would sit on the porch, not talking business, but talking about everything and nothing. He taught me how to grill the perfect steak, a skill he had honed over decades of weekend barbecues, and in those simple moments, I felt a sense of peace I had never found in a boardroom. One evening, as the scent of hickory smoke filled the air, he put a hand on my shoulder. "You know," he said, looking out at the setting sun, "I used to think success was about how much you could acquire, how big your house was, how fancy your car. I was wrong. Success is about how much you can give back, how many lives you can touch for the better. You figured that out a lot sooner than I did." His words were a final validation that I was on the right path. But it was my mother who pushed me to take the next step. She had become heavily involved in the scholarship foundation, interviewing candidates and corresponding with them. She came to me one day, her eyes shining with an idea that would change everything. "These kids," she said, her voice brimming with passion, "they're brilliant. They have the drive, they have the ideas, but they don't have the network. They don't have someone to show them the ropes. What if we did more than just give them money? What if we built a real program? A mentorship network, connecting them with leaders in every field. A summer incubator where they can develop their ideas with real resources. We could build a farm system for the next generation of leaders." The idea was audacious. It would require a massive investment of time and money, and it had nothing to do with our core business. I could already hear the objections from the board, the arguments about shareholder value and focus. But looking at my mother, seeing the fire in her eyes, I knew it was the right thing to do. This was the next chapter. I committed a significant portion of my personal wealth to launch what we called the Ascend program. We converted a former corporate retreat into a state-of-the-art campus. And we recruited mentors from every industry: tech, arts, medicine, finance. The first cohort of 50 students arrived that summer, a diverse, electric group of young minds, each carrying a story of struggle and a dream of impact. Maya, now a rising star in our tech division, became the program's director. She was a natural, a perfect blend of tough love, mentor, and inspirational leader. Walking through the campus, listening to the passionate debates in the classrooms and the late-night brainstorming sessions in the common areas, I felt a sense of purpose that transcended any business success. This was legacy in its purest form. Michael, to my surprise, threw himself into the project with a quiet intensity. He started a legal clinic for the students, teaching them about contracts, intellectual property, and how to navigate the complex legal landscape of entrepreneurship. He was patient, thorough, and genuinely invested in their success. One afternoon, I saw him sitting with a young woman from a disadvantaged background, patiently explaining the intricacies of patent law. He looked up, saw me watching, and gave me a small, almost shy nod of acknowledgement. We didn't need words. We were building something together, something that mattered. The program was a resounding success. The first batch of graduates went on to launch their own companies, join innovative nonprofits, and bring fresh ideas back into established industries. The Ascend program became a model, and other corporations began to reach out, asking how they could replicate it. I found myself speaking at conferences not about business strategy, but about corporate responsibility and social impact. I had become an advocate for a new kind of capitalism, one that measured its return not just in profits, but in human potential. Through it all, I found a new kind of love. Her name was Alina, a documentary filmmaker who was doing a piece on the Ascend program. She was sharp, insightful, and had a way of seeing the world that was both deeply empathetic and brutally honest. She wasn't impressed by my title or my wealth. She was interested in my story, my flaws, my motivations. Our first date wasn't at a 5-star restaurant, but at a food truck in a part of the city I used to be ashamed to be seen in. We sat on a curb eating tacos and talking for hours. I told her everything: the years of feeling like a failure, the burning desire for revenge, the slow, sometimes painful journey to forgiveness. She listened, truly listened, and when I was done, she didn't offer pity or praise. She simply said, "That's a hell of a story. What's the next chapter?" With Alina, I learned to be vulnerable. I learned that strength wasn't about being invincible. It was about being brave enough to show your scars. She challenged me, pushed me out of my comfort zone, and loved me not for the person I had become, but for the person I had always been underneath it all. We got married a year later. In a small ceremony on the Ascend campus, surrounded by the students who had become our extended family, my father walked me down the aisle, and Michael was my best man. During his speech, he held up his glass, his voice thick with emotion. "My brother spent a lot of his life trying to prove me wrong," he said. Along the way, he proved everyone right. Everyone who ever saw the potential in him, everyone who ever believed in kindness and second chances, in the power of building people up instead of tearing them down. He's not just my brother. He's my hero. There wasn't a dry eye in the house. Life continued its gentle, unfolding rhythm. The company thrived, not because we were ruthless, but because we were principled. People wanted to work for us, not just for the paycheck, but for the purpose. The Ascend program expanded, with campuses opening around the world. My parents retired, spending their time traveling and visiting the various programs, their hearts full. One evening, Alina and I were sitting on our porch, much like the one I used to share with my father. We were watching our son Leo, who was 5, chasing fireflies in the backyard. He was a whirlwind of energy and curiosity, a beautiful blend of her passion and my quiet determination. "Hey, he has your drive," Alina said, leaning her head on my shoulder. "I hope he has your heart," I replied. "He'll have both," she said. "He'll have the best of both of you." As I watched Leo laugh, a pure, unburdened sound that seemed to light up the night. I thought about the long, winding road that had brought me to this moment. The anger, the ambition, the revenge, all felt like a lifetime ago. A story about someone else. The man who needed to prove his worth had been replaced by a man who was simply grateful for his blessings. I had spent so much of my life focused on the destination, on the moment of triumph where I could finally say, "I made it." But I had learned that life isn't about the destinations. It's about the journey. It's about the people you meet along the way. It's the lessons you learn in the valleys, the person you become in the process. My revenge, realized, was never really about Michael. It was about the boy inside me who felt unseen and unheard. The journey to success was my way of finally giving that boy the voice and the validation he craved. But the true victory was in realizing that I didn't need external validation to be whole. The true victory was in finding peace. If you're still on your journey, still fighting your battles, still dreaming of that moment of triumph, I hope you find your own version of this peace. I hope you discover that the sweetest victory isn't in the applause or the accolades, but in the quiet moments of connection, in the love you give and receive, in the knowledge that you've left the world a little better than you found it. This has been my story. It's a story of a boy who was lost and the man who found his way home. Thank you for walking a part of that path with me. If my journey has inspired you in some small way, the greatest compliment you could give me is to pay it forward. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories of the human spirit. And remember, your story is still being written. Make it a good one. The years that followed were not a dramatic, cinematic series of events, but a slow, beautiful unfolding, like a flower blooming in time-lapse photography. The big, defining battles were over, replaced by the quieter, more profound work of living a life of purpose. The Ascend program became my primary focus, a living, breathing entity that demanded constant nurturing and evolution. I found myself less of a CEO and more of a gardener, tending to the soil, pulling the weeds, and watching with immense pride as 1,000 different flowers bloomed in their own unique ways. Leo grew, as children do, with a startling speed that made me acutely aware of the passage of time. He was a curious, compassionate child, his mother's piercing gaze and a stubborn streak that my mother swore was all mine. He didn't grow up in the shadow of the family drama that had shaped me. For him, Michael was just Uncle Mike, slightly formal but kind man who taught him how to play chess and told him terrible jokes. The past for him was a foreign country. One Saturday, we were all gathered at my parents' house for a barbecue. The air was thick with the smell of grilled chicken and freshly cut grass. Michael was there with his wife, Sarah Kind, gentlewoman he had met through the Ascend program's legal clinicin, their 2 young children. The dynamic was so different from the tense, competitive gatherings of my youth. There was an easy camaraderie, a shared history that had been healed not by forgetting, but by understanding. I was inside helping my mother in the kitchen when I heard raised voices from the backyard. It was Leo and Michael's son, Daniel, arguing over a toy. The argument escalated, and suddenly I heard Leo shout, "Well, my dad is richer than your dad." The words hit me like a physical blow. All the old anxieties, the insecurities I thought I had buried came rushing back. I felt a familiar, hot flush of shame. I walked out onto the patio, ready to intervene, to lecture Leo about the emptiness of material comparisons. But before I could say a word, Michael was there. He knelt down, putting a hand on his son's shoulder, and looking at both boys with a calm seriousness. "Hey," he said softly, "look at me. That's not how we measure things in this family. We don't measure people by how much money they have. We measure them by how kind they are. We measure them by how they help others. Your Uncle Leo," he said, looking at my son, "is one of the kindest people I know. And your dad," he said, turning to Daniel, "is one of the hardest working. That's what makes you rich. Not the money. The heart." He stood up, and his eyes met mine across the patio. In that moment, I saw the full circle of his transformation. The man who had once built his entire identity on being wealthier and more successful than me was now teaching his son. And mine, a lesson that I was still struggling to fully internalize. He had become the man I had always hoped he could be. I gave him a small, grateful nod, and the unspoken understanding passed between us once more. The cycle was truly broken. This incident became a catalyst for a new project. I realized that the lessons of the Ascend program, the focus on character, empathy, and purpose, needed to start even earlier. We launched a new initiative, the Roots program, designed for children. It was a series of workshops, summer camps, and after-school programs focused on emotional intelligence, community service, and creative problem-solving. We taught kids not just what to think, but how to think, and more importantly, how to feel. The Roots program was perhaps the most rewarding thing I ever did. Seeing a group of 10-year-olds from different backgrounds learning to communicate, to resolve conflicts, to work together on a community garden project, it filled a space in my heart I didn't even know was empty. It felt like I was going back in time and giving the younger version of myself the tools I so desperately needed. Alina and I made a conscious decision to raise Leo with these values. We talked openly about failure, about our own mistakes. We didn't just tell him to be kind. We showed him what kindness looked like. We volunteered together. We had gratitude dinners where we would each share something we were thankful for. We tried imperfectly to build a world around him where his worth was never, ever tied to his achievements. As I entered my late 50s, I began to step back from the day-to-day operations of the company. I had built a strong leadership team, many of whom were graduates of the Ascend program, and I trusted them to carry the torch. My role shifted to that of a chairman and mentor, focusing on strategy, culture, and the long-term vision. This gave me more time for what had become my true passion, the foundation. The foundation had grown beyond my wildest dreams. The Ascend and Roots programs were now global, with a network of alumni who were starting their own initiatives, creating a ripple effect of positive change that was impossible to quantify. We started hosting an annual summit, bringing together our students, mentors, and partners from around the world. It was at one of these summits that I had an experience that brought my entire journey into sharp focus. We were holding a panel discussion on redefining success. On the stage with me were Maya, now a celebrated tech innovator, a young doctor from rural India who had started a mobile clinic with our help, and a musician from a rough inner-city neighborhood who had founded a program to teach classical music to at-risk youth. Each of them told their story. They spoke of the challenges they had faced, the moments of doubt, and the breakthroughs they had experienced. They were brilliant, inspiring, and humble. As I listened, I felt a profound sense of awe. I wasn't the hero of their stories. I was just the guy who had opened a door. They had done the hard work. They had walked through it and built their own worlds. At the end of the panel, a young woman in the audience stood up to ask a question. She looked nervous, but her voice was clear. "My question is for all of you," she said, her eyes scanning the panel. "You've all achieved so much. You've overcome incredible odds. But what I want to know is, what was the single most important moment in your journey? The one turning point that changed everything?" Maya spoke first, about the day she received the scholarship call. The doctor spoke about the first life she saved with her mobile clinic. The musician spoke about the first time a student performed a perfect sonata. Then they all looked at me. The spotlight, figuratively and literally, was back on me. I thought for a moment, my mind racing through the decades. The moment I decided to start my business, the day I took over the company, the victory against the takeover, none of those felt quite right. I took a deep breath and spoke from the heart. I think the most important moment in my journey, I began, wasn't a moment of triumph. It was a moment of surrender. It was the day I realized that the revenge I had spent so much of my life chasing was a poison I was drinking myself. It was the day I looked at the man who had tried to break me and saw not an enemy, but a broken person who needed help. It was the moment I understood that true power isn't the ability to destroy your enemies, but the capacity to forgive them, and in doing so, to free yourself. The room was silent. I looked out at the sea of young, hopeful faces, and I saw my own reflection in them. I saw the hunger, the ambition, the fear, and the incredible potential. "Your journey will have its own turning points," I continued. "You will face setbacks, betrayals, and moments of deep despair. You will be tempted to build your success on the ashes of those who wronged you. And I'm here to tell you, that's a path that leads nowhere. The real victory, the only victory that lasts, is the one you build on a foundation of compassion for others and for yourself. Don't just be successful, be significant." After the summit, as I was packing to leave, there was a knock on my hotel room door. It was the young woman who had asked the question. She was holding a worn copy of a book I had written about my experiences. "I just wanted to thank you," she said, her eyes shining. "I've been so angry for so long. About my past. About the people who underestimated me. I thought my success had to be a weapon. What you said today, it changed something in me." I smiled, feeling a sense of completion that I had never experienced before. "That's why we tell these stories," I said. "Not to glorify the past, but to liberate the future." That night on the flight home, I looked out the window at the vast, dark expanse below. The lights of cities twinkled like scattered stars. I thought about the arc of my life, from that cramped, lonely apartment to this moment, flying between worlds I had helped to build. The revenge that had once seemed so important was now just a footnote, a necessary but painful chapter in a much larger, more beautiful story. I had spent my life trying to build an empire, only to discover that the real treasure was the impact I had on individual lives. I had sought to prove my worth to the world, only to find it in the quiet moments of connection with my family. I had wanted to be a king, only to learn that the greatest joy is in serving others. As the plane began its descent, I saw the lights of my city coming into view. My city, my home. My family was there. My work was there. My peace was there. The journey was long, and it was far from over, but I was finally, truly home. And that was a victory more satisfying than any revenge I could have ever imagined. The final decade of my life has been a masterclass in the beauty of a quiet existence. The roar of the crowd, the thrill of the deal, the sting of a comeback, those are all fires that burn bright and then fade. What remains, what truly sustains you, is the gentle, consistent warmth of a life lived with intention. I am now in my 70s. My hair is silver, my steps are slower, and my hands, once clenched in fists of anger and ambition, are now often found holding Elena's or playing chess with Leo, who is now a man himself. With a family of his own, Michael and I meet for coffee every Tuesday. We don't talk about business anymore. We talk about our grandchildren, about our aches and pains, about the books we're reading. He is a grandfather now, a gentle, soft-spoken man who volunteers at the Roots program, teaching kids that the most important strategy in any game is to be a good sport. The arrogant lawyer I once knew is a ghost, a faint echo in the laughter of the man who became my friend. We never speak of the past, not because it's painful, but because it's irrelevant. It's a closed book on a high shelf, and we have no interest in taking it down. My role in the company is now purely ceremonial. I attend the annual shareholder meeting, say a few words about the values that built us, and spend the rest of my time as a spectator, watching with pride as the next generation carries the torch. The foundation, however, is my life's work. It is the vessel that will carry our values forward long after I am gone. Last year, we opened the 100th Ascend Program campus. It was in a small, vibrant town in Kenya. On my last night in Kenya, I sat outside my small cabin, looking up at the brilliant, unfamiliar constellations. I thought about the angry young man I once was, so desperate for revenge, so certain that success was the only answer. I felt a deep, abiding compassion for him. He was doing the best he could with the tools he had. He thought he was building a fortress to protect himself, but he was really just building a prison. The journey out of that prison was not a victory march. It was a slow, gentle process of dismantling the walls, brick by brick, and discovering that the world outside was far more beautiful than he had ever imagined from. Behind his bars, my life now is simple. It is filled with the things that truly matter: the love of my family, the joy of my work, the beauty of a quiet sunrise, the taste of a good cup of coffee, the sound of my grandchildren's laughter. I have more joy in this one, simple life than I ever had in all the years I spent chasing a bigger one. This is my final thought, my last piece of wisdom for anyone who is still on their journey, still fighting their battles, still dreaming of a day when they will finally arrive. Don't wait for the grand finale to find your happiness. Don't pin your peace on some future achievement. The victory is not in the destination. The victory is in the becoming. It's in the person you choose to be right now, in this moment. It's in the kindness you show, the grace you offer, the love you give. Revenge is a path that leads back to yourself. Forgiveness is the path that leads you home. I chose to come home. I hope you do too. This has been my story. Thank you for listening. Now go and write your own. If that story gave you chills, smash that like button and let me know in the comments what part hit you the hardest. Was it the initial takeover? The final apology? Or the quiet moments of redemption? And if you have your own